bases dropped on a new edition of Soccer Down here. It's November 18th. It's an Overreaction Monday. We'll be getting into your reactions from the United States beating Canada handily, by the way. We'll get into that, how it happened, what it means, if anything, what has to happen now for the U.S. to reach the semifinals of the CONCACAF Nations League. We'll get into the MLS Expansion Draft, which will take place tomorrow after 5 o'clock p.m. The lists are out of who is eligible to be drafted. There are mock drafts that have been completed. We'll get into all of that as we go this morning. Also, rumors as silly season is completely and utterly underway in Major League Soccer with players coming, players going, all kinds of talk and innuendo and discussion and maybe not a lot of concrete stuff, but there's a lot of talk. There's a lot of stuff, and we'll get into that as we go this morning as well. But most important, we'll get into your reactions from the weekend. Tweet at us at Soccer Down here. Let us know what you are over, under, on par reacting about from the weekend that was. Jason Longshore, John Nelson here with you this morning. And, John, you want to start with the U.S.? There's really not a ton to get into. I mean, set pieces, set pieces, set pieces, set pieces.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Before we get into that, though, can I overreact, or maybe it's an on-par react about something that happened in the timeline both over the weekend and this morning?
Okay.
Shout out to both Marshall Voigt and to Daniel Price for getting Soccer Down here stuff. It's very humbling to see that kind of stuff. Marshall picked up one of our Soccer Down here sweatshirts, took a picture, says it's just in time for the cold South Carolina winter. And Daniel has invested in the ceramic for Soccer Down here. He's got his SDH mug, and he says it looks and feels good. So it has passed the ceramic coffee mug inspection. But thanks to everybody who has been supporting the show, continues to support the show, and is now showing pictures of how they're supporting the show. It's something that's very cool to see.
It's very cool to see. We appreciate it very, very much. Thanks for being part of the SDH family. And you can go get your own stuff at teespring.com. You can also get scarves from us directly. Next chance directly to get one will be tonight at the Brewhouse Cafe for soccer over there. We'll get into the international break. We'll also look ahead to matches in league play on the weekend. And in the second hour, we will get you set for the Copa Libertadores final that will be next Saturday in Lima, Peru, between River Plate and Flamengo. Howard Hamilton of Soccer Metrics will come out and join us tonight to get us set for that match. So tonight, 6 o'clock, Brewhouse Cafe. Come join us. Come buy a scarf. Come listen to the show. Come ask questions. Grab a mic. Talk about your team, whatever you want to get into. You can also get scarves tomorrow at Wild Heaven West End, where myself, Mike Conti, and Kevin Egan will be having our broadcasters roundtable. We'll be talking about what the season was like in our worlds in 2019, what we're looking forward to in 2020, stories from the road, favorite restaurants in some of these different towns, all that kinds of stuff. So, Wild Heaven tomorrow. We'll start having drinks at 7. We'll start talking about 7:30. Yes. And if you want to hear this live, you got to come out and see it. We're not going to broadcast it live. We want the people who are coming out to get first crack at it. It will go up on the network eventually, but first we want people to come join us live and get that conversation firsthand. So,
yes,
2 chances next 2 days to buy scarves. You can do that at the Brewhouse tonight. You can do that at Wild Heaven tomorrow.
Set pieces, and set pieces. I did have a couple of players that I wanted to put in the spot shadow to get your feedback on that as I was going back over and reading wires and looking at highlights and things. I wanted to get your thoughts on a couple of guys and their performances in this match against Canada from the weekend.
Okay.
First and foremost, Gyasi Zardes. I know that a lot of folks were looking at Zardes being in the starting 11, and it was the raised eyebrow, or however you want to phrase it. It was an interesting choice. Well, I was just trying to think of Josh Sargent up top personally. And
has Josh Sargent done enough to earn the job with no questions asked?
With no questions asked, I would say no.
Well, you have to say no, because what has he done to say that?
Not a
Well,
lot.
no, he's done plenty. Don't jump back and forth to wild swings here. He's done plenty of things, but is he the number one striker for the U.S.? No, I think that's Josie Altidore. So
Yeah.
Is he the number two? I don't think it's a
2A,
guarantee
2B?
at this point. Well, obviously, yeah. Or he's number three, because he had the opportunity in Canada and really didn't give you anything. Jossie Zardes gets the game here and scores 2 goals.
Yeah.
Look, I think the criticism of Jossie Zardes is very unfair, because I don't know what he's being compared to. Is Jossie Zardes a world-class striker? No, he's not. I don't think anybody's claimed that he is. Is Jossie Zardes a goal scorer at the international level? Well, he's done it. I mean, yes, he is. Is he a goal scorer in MLS? Yes, he is. I don't know why there's such frustration about Jossie Zardes. I mean, when people are going nuts about Jossie Zardes on Friday night after he scores 2 goals in a must-win game, really? What? Why? There's kind of just this weird thing around it. Look, the U.S. men's national team has been as frustrating as they could possibly be in recent months. I think we all know that. But when things go well, you kind of do have to just accept that they went well. And it doesn't have to be, yeah, but. Jossie Zardes had a good game.
Yeah.
Jossie Zardes scored twice in a game where you needed goals. What's wrong with that?
Last time I checked, the answer was nothing.
I thought Sargent would get the start. Ultimately, Josh Sargent will be a better player than Jossie Zardes if he continues to develop the way we think. But it's not this, unbelievable thing that you turn to a veteran in a must-win game over a guy in Sargent who had the last game and didn't do a ton with it.
The other 2 guys that I had that I wanted to get your gauge on were Jordan Morris and Serginho Dest.
Look, Jordan Morris is a game changer, and he's an unconventional game changer. Maybe that's why he's so difficult for some opponents. He's powerful, he's strong, he's got speed, he works incredibly hard. He's not conventional. He's not. He doesn't have top technique, but is he effective? Yeah, go ask the Seattle Sounders about that. He shows up more often than not. And is he a prototype? No, but is he an effective player for this team? Yeah, I think he is, and I think he gives them a lot. He was big here, and I kind of had him down as my X factor going into this, and he ended up delivering on that. Dest was okay. I didn't think Dest was unbelievable. Dest was very good. He was constantly going forward as you would expect. The question about Serginho Dest is going to be, can he defend when he has to, when they're pinned back, when they don't have all the possession? They're not just going forward. Can he defend in those scenarios? And we haven't seen it yet for the national team. We'll have to wait and see on that. But in this type of game, yeah, it's a perfect fit for him, because Canada's going to give up that space and let him go forward, and he's going to take it, and he's going to be dangerous.
So when it comes to this particular performance, I guess I don't want to use a grade scale. I don't want to sit there and go 1 to 5 or A+ to F or whatever, but you did what you had to do in this situation. You got the job done, and you had guys do it that took advantage of set pieces. That's, what we talked about coming into this, is that's what it was all about. And I know that post game, there was some choice words from the Canadian side, and when you let something happen early on, and the field just kind of Wasn't I'm trying to think of it was a cuss word from the manager discussing what happened.
I mean, but what was he upset about? Was he upset about something that happened in the match? Was he upset about his team?
He was upset. He was upset about his team and letting something happen early on, and it was
probably conceding a goal in the second minute. I mean, that would normally do it.
Yeah.
Look, I don't think John Herdman got the tactics right. I don't think John Herdman got this right at all. I think the idea around playing Alphonso Davies as a left back, Canada needs him up top. I didn't think Cavallini really gave you much up top. Davies can defend as a left back, but you wanted him in a more dangerous spot for Canada to threaten the U.S., and I just don't think he was there enough. They tried to flip-flop him and Larea a couple of different times in the first half. It didn't work. And when you're in this game, if you're Canada, and the numbers are so narrow for Canada to get to the Hex, a draw would have been incredible for them here. They don't get it, and they might miss out on the Hex because of this kind of performance. You gave up 3 goals in 34 minutes. I mean, you gave up a goal in the second minute, but you gave up 3 goals in 34. That's awful. And it's not even like you got played off the park. That's where you've got to be real frustrated if you're Canada. And I think Herdman can have some beef with his team because they seemed a little overwhelmed here in this match, and they shouldn't have been. You didn't have a wild, raucous crowd to deal with. You had a big occasion, and it looked like it was too big for these Canadian players across the board. But you now are at huge risk of not getting into the Hex, and you had everything on a golden platter for you. You could have come in a few different ways here. You could have come in and played a 5-3-2 and sat back and defended and just soaked up pressure. You didn't really do that. You could have played what you did in Toronto that was so effective. You didn't really do that. You kind of went not even in between. You went with an option C that didn't make a ton of sense with Davies at left back in this kind of game. So I don't know what Herdman was thinking, honestly. And it helped the U.S. I mean, the U.S. was good on set pieces. They worked hard. I mean, that's kind of a given that you should be getting, but you got it here. They weren't sharp. They weren't building out of the back effectively. They had far too many turnovers, but Canada really didn't take advantage of much of anything and didn't really threaten very much at all, which was pretty surprising. With everything on the line for Canada, with all the opportunity in front of them, they really seemed like they were out of their depth. And this has been something that's happened with Canada multiple times over the last few decades. You think back to the CONCACAF World Cup qualifying semifinal round where I think all they had to do was go down to Honduras and get a result. Not easy to do, but they just had to go get a result, and they got beat 8-1. You get these types of games that it's just, what happened in this moment for you? You got it in this past Gold Cup where you lost to Haiti, and it's like, why are you falling apart at this point where you're showing promise? Things look like they're moving in the right direction. And then you get this. It's hard for teams to make that jump to another level, and we're seeing Canada improve, but they haven't gotten there yet. And this U.S. team, even without Christian Pulisic, even without Michael Bradley, even without Zach Steffen, had enough players who have been in these types of situations before and handled themselves well. I mean, the back line wasn't great, wasn't bad. They were just kind of there. I thought Tim Ream really struggled. Ream at left back, I'm kind of over this whole deal here. I was a little surprised by that one from Berhalter. I think a lot of people, when they saw the lineup, they thought it was going to be a 3-5-2, and it wasn't. It was what it's been, the 4-3-3. But Ream, as a fairly traditional left back, he just stayed at home more than Dest did. I don't know. DeAndre Yedlin and Dest at outside back for me would be a better approach, but maybe you had enough to fear about Canada that you wanted to have essentially 3 stay home and let Dest be the one who goes forward. Okay. I can understand that. Jackson Ewell, Weston McKinney, Sebastian Lletget were your starters in midfield. Surprised Morales didn't start. It ultimately didn't matter. Ewell was, nah. I mean, he looked like a player that has 5 caps. He's a player who I think can show more, and I think will. I really like his game, but he didn't really put his imprint on this. This is why it's such a weird game to go back and talk about, because, you know, I'm kind of with Soccer America on the ratings here. It was okay. Like, it's a lot of 6s, a lot of 7 out of 10 is about as high as you get. No one was outstanding. No one was out and out bad. It was a pretty average kind of performance, which you flip it to the other side and to the opponent, Canada was bad in this match. They're worse than the U.S. were in Canada last time around. And that's something that they're going to have to get over that hump. The U.S. showed that at least in this kind of game against this kind of opponent, backs against the wall, they can do enough to win. Okay. I mean, it's kind of the bare minimum, but okay. Now all you got to do is go to the Cayman Islands and face Cuba and win. You don't have to win by 5. You don't have to win by anything more than 1 goal. And you're into the CONCACAF Nations League semifinals, which was the job at hand. It's felt like in this year, it's been a constant 2 steps back and 1 step forward. Yeah, and I said it that way intentionally. Because you go back to the Gold Cup, those pre-Gold Cup friendlies were so bad. And you come into the Gold Cup, and I felt like I was yelling at people saying, look, just you have to get to the final. Well, they're not even playing that good. They can't even guarantee getting to the final. I'm like, well, you have to get to the final. Like, that should be the expectation. The U.S. has to be second best in CONCACAF right now. That's where they have to get. They got there. It was the bare minimum. Okay. Here, it was the bare minimum was win the group and go to the CONCACAF Nations League semifinals. Well, you made it a bumpy road, but you did. You got there. If you beat Cuba, and you should, Canada went to the Caymans and won 1-0. I would like to think you can do better than that, but you just got to take care of business. It's not inspiring. It's not exciting right now. They're just doing enough. The lucky thing for them is that nobody else is really taking charge of CONCACAF outside of Mexico. I mean, Costa Rica drew at home to Haiti. Costa Rica is not what they used to be as the 2/3 in CONCACAF. And no one else really is. Right now, it's the U.S. by default. And at a time when the U.S. is not its best, at least you got that going for you. I'm still not with Ernie Stewart feeling completely confident that the U.S. qualifies for the World Cup, because you got to go on the road and win some games. But it's not like anybody else is playing you off the park either. So, yay.
So you're kind of in position by default.
Essentially, and it's just because your talent is what it is. It's better than a lot in CONCACAF. It's not as good as Mexico. You're not playing above your talent. You kind of are right there at the 2, 3, 4. Canada could have gotten into that mix. They didn't. They really took a step back here with this kind of performance. We'll see where their confidence is. See if they can find a way into the Hex, because now they got to get some help. The rest of CONCACAF is just, it's kind of there at the moment. I mean, you have your usual suspects with Costa Rica, with Panama, with Honduras, with Haiti that's in the mix, with Curacao that's in the mix, but nobody has stepped up to say we are right behind Mexico and we're going to challenge them now. It's still the U.S. essentially by default, and I'd like for them to earn that here at some point. I hope they can get to that point, but they haven't shown it Man, probably since. I mean, you're probably back to pre-World Cup 2014 because you lost a home semifinal in 15. You did win the 17 Gold Cup, which a lot of people took as less seriously as the 2015 edition. You're kind of just there. Like, nobody else has stepped up to take it. So it is what it is. You get the win. You get the win that you had to get. You have to give the team credit for that. I mean, I've seen a lot of back and forth about, well, they fought harder, they played harder, and that's kind of the bare minimum. So should we even compliment that? I mean, yeah, it was enough. It was enough in this game. You get the early goal, which always changes things. I mean, I think anybody who's been around the game knows that. You get a goal or give up a goal in the first 5 minutes, and everything is different. You got that, and that was huge. And then you get a second a few minutes later, and you get a third before halftime, and you're in a great spot. And you're going to win that game more often than not. So the U.S. does enough, and now they play Cuba tomorrow in the Cayman Islands. They should be able to do enough there, and then you get meaningful games, which is very important for this team. You have to go, and now you're going to get a semifinal where you're going to be the favorite, but you're going to play a team that can absolutely beat you. So that's a needed match for the United States. I'm glad they're getting that opportunity. Again, if they get past Cuba tomorrow, it's like you don't want to take anything for granted, but they should. Sadly, we have to counterbalance that every time because of the way they've played lately. It's good to get these meaningful matches, and that was why getting through this group was so important. So now you're going to get at least one more. If you win that, you're going to get a final with Mexico again, and we'll see where the progress is because we keep hearing about progress, and that's what we're supposed to be looking for. Well, you get another final with Mexico, you're going to have a direct comparison in progress.
So you're saying across the board, 6s and 7s pretty much for everybody that stepped on the pitch in that match?
Between 5 and 7. I mean,
okay.
I think the best players were Morris and Zardes. I don't think anybody was bad, but I don't think anybody was great. It was a pretty average kind of night. And the flip side is sometimes when you get those early goals and you get that early lead, then yeah, you downshift. You go into second or third gear and you're just chilling because you have a comfortable lead. So that makes it a little bit easier on that side too. But you took care of business, and that's what you had to do in this game. So you have to give them credit for that. They took advantage of their set pieces, always critical in these moments. So they did what they had to do. And now they need to do that one more time against Cuba tomorrow. And you're in the CONCACAF Nations League semifinals where you should have been.
And the reason I ask you across the board is because I'm looking at something that's not Soccer America that gave Morris a 9, Zardes and Dest 8s, and then everybody else was a 6 or a 7.
I didn't think anybody got to 9 or 8 level at all. I didn't think anybody was that great. I thought Morris was very good. I didn't think Dest was at that point. If you want to give Zardes an 8 because he scored twice, okay, I can roll there. But no, I didn't think anybody was to that level.
The direct quote, and it's Nick Mendola at NBC Sports. For Morris, he said, "This kid, aside from one horrific late cross, the Seattle Sounders man had another incredible game in the U.S. shirt, goal assist, sub-off win." That's how he gave him a 9.
Yeah, but okay, the thing about the cross, like, do we really get into that kind of conversation about any top player in the world? If he played for another team, would they really even throw that in? Would that even be a talking point for an Italian player, French player, an English player? There's this thing about Jordan Morris, like, yeah, he's not a prototypical winger. He's not really a forward either. He's somewhere in between, but he's shown in Seattle and he's shown in this role with the U.S. that he can be effective. And isn't that the most important thing? he has a bad cross, he has a bad cross. I don't, Again, his technique is not world class, but he finds a way to make up for it. I don't think he was a 9, but I also would not include anything about one bad play in the match. He was very effective. That's why he's in the team. And that's why I think he is a starter with the current group. I don't think you take him out of the lineup.
Then the 8s, Zardes, a surprise starter, the big man delivered in a big way.
It's not a shocking start. I mean, I don't think Sargent or Zardes, I don't think either one has really truly grabbed claim of that number 2 role yet behind Altidore. I think Sargent had his opportunity in Toronto, didn't really take it, so Zardes gets to this match, and he delivered. So I think he'll probably be the number 2 right now until Sargent becomes a guy who you can't keep out of the team because of his strong performances at the club level. And he's getting there, but he's not there yet.
And then with Dest, he said we should all write this 19-year-old thank you cards. What a dribbler.
Yeah, I mean, he gets forward well. Yes. Let's not completely overreact here, but yes, he gets forward well, and if you get, and this is going to be the question for Greg Berhalter going forward, if you want to play DeAndre Yedlin and Sergiño Dest on the outside, which I think is a possibility, okay, you're going to have 2 strong center backs, and is that Aaron Long and John Brooks? It could be. And you're going to have a strong defensive midfield. Defensive being the key elements there, because you're going to want Dest and Yedlin to bomb forward with their speed and unbalanced teams. So if you elect to do that, then that changes the way you're set up a little bit, because then you're going to need Tyler Adams in the midfield with his defensive abilities, and you might want to pair someone with him if it's Bradley paired with him, or if it's Adams. Can McKenzie be a little bit more of that deeper 8, sitting deeper, and pair with Adams? Can it be Leggett there to give you that cover, so that group of 4, your 2 center backs and your 2 holding midfielders, sit more and allow your outside backs to really go? Because that's when you get the best out of Sergiño Dest. When you have to sit back and defend more, is he going to be as effective? That's the question for him, and it's a question for most young attacking outside backs. DeAndre Yedlin, there were questions about him in those situations throughout his young career. I think he's shown that he can play that kind of role now. Okay, can Dest do that as well? Because then you can play that setup with 2 outside backs who can get forward and hurt opponents, but can also defend when they have to. You can play that against more teams. Right now, Dest is a great player against teams that you are better than, and you're going to be able to attack. Can Dest give you that type of performance against Mexico? Well, he didn't last time around. Can he do that going forward? That's what you're going to have to see, because it's not just a dribbling role. I mean, think back to Jurgen Klinsmann wouldn't play DeAndre Yedlin as a right back. Played him as a winger. You didn't trust him as a defender. So you've got to get to where you can trust Dest as a defender, and that's just going to take some time to see and take development from him as well.
Chris Hutchison on the Twitters this morning in the Overreaction Monday, he says, we've beaten Canada and Cuba, period. Inspiring, period.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of where I'm at. Like, you've done what you were supposed to do. The problem is you had lumped in there an awful performance in Canada that puts a damper on it. But this is what CONCACAF Nations League is, and I think a lot of people get hung up on, well, you got to play good teams. You got to play good teams. Well, the U.S. also has to be good against teams that they're better than. And that's part of being a top team, and they haven't consistently done that for years. You shouldn't be sweating a game in Toronto. You shouldn't be sweating a game in the Cayman Islands. You shouldn't be, sweating games on the road anywhere in CONCACAF. That's not to diminish the competition, but that's to say that if the United States is going to get to where they want to get with this men's national team program, there shouldn't be a fear of going on the road, and that hasn't happened yet. So you took care of a group that you should have taken care of. You had a setback in it that made you sweat, but you rebounded, and you're going to go through on goal differential, and okay, you went through. But there's a blemish. Got to get rid of those blemishes at some point.
Daniel Price said that he was going back and forth with you during and after the match. He says, and although we won, it left much to be desired. While you could argue it was better than the first match, it didn't feel that way. Canada just played poorly.
It was better than the first. It was better than the first match. I mean, because you worked harder and you showed more just energy in this. I mean, it was better. The U.S. played better than they did in the first match. That's not fair to say they didn't. Canada was poor. Canada was worse than the U.S. was in Toronto. The U.S. was a little bit better than Canada was in Toronto. So that's why you get the swing that you did.
Then Daniel continues. He says, if Canada went into Orlando and played like they did in Toronto, I think it'd be a much different conversation today. I don't think we win. A result, probably, but a win by 3 goals was more than it should have been, I think.
A win by 3 goals, yeah. If Canada plays their best like they did in Toronto, then yeah, you're not winning by 3 goals. You could still win, potentially, especially with the lineup that Herdman threw out, because they're not as dangerous going forward with Davies in that role. They never, and that's what was so baffling about it on the Canadian side, is you set up Davies to play as a left back in a match where all you need is a result. So you would think that you would be in a somewhat defensive posture, but you set up an attacking left back, but then you don't really use him to attack until you're already trailing by 2 goals. It didn't make much sense. I mean, it felt like Canada was really trying to get down the right side early on, which, okay. I mean, Richie Laryea proven to be effective doing that, but okay. Why aren't you forcing it to the left to Davies and letting him do what he does, especially running up against Serginho Dest? I mean, if I'm Canada, if I'm Alphonso Davies, I'm begging for the ball to go up against him, because Davies has shown more in his young career than Dest, and that's a matchup you would generally like, unless they just thought Laryea could get past Ream, and he couldn't do that either. So I don't understand the Canadian approach. I think going with the same lineup that they did in Toronto, that same approach, playing a 4 central, kind of tucked in midfielders, whether you want to call it a box or a diamond. I thought it was more diamond. A lot of people call it a box. It's roughly the same thing. And Davies and David up top to try to hit them on the break and just play over the top, that would have felt like it made more sense here. So I don't know. I don't know. I think the questions from Canada about John Herdman's approach have to be pretty strong, because as much as we've questioned Greg Berhalter about approaches in matches and being too rigid at times, Herdman kind of went out into left field here and pulled out a tactical setup that didn't seem to fit what the match called for. And you have to question him on that as well. Anything else on U.S.-Canada?
Yeah, I found Herdman's response to what you were talking about in the National Post.
Okay.
He said, when you have Bayern Munich starting left back and he's playing Champions League, who can give you that width and provide that inner tackling, as well as athletically deal with the players the U.S. have, which is pace for fun on that side, and you're coming to an away venue when a draw could see your way through, he's the best left back in Canada without a doubt. Arguably, he's the best left back in Bayern Munich, and I think for us, I think it's a no-brainer. We'd love to have him up front. We'd love to be able to play him in 2 positions, but when you have quality like Jonathan David, Junior Hoylett, Lucas Cavallini, and you're looking to put all those pieces on the field and the best players out there, that's what we did, end quote.
So how did Alphonso Davies become the best left back in Canada in the last month? Because he didn't play left back in Toronto. And that's the question I have, is why go away from something that obviously worked? And you basically made the decision that you wanted Cavallini instead of Kamal Miller. And I thought Miller played well in Canada. I would have went with that because then you have the possibility, depending on how the game is going, of going to a line of 5. If Davies is your left back, but you played him as a forward last time because he wasn't the best left back in Bayern Munich just yet, he became that in the last month, I guess. I would have started the way they did last time, which was you bring in Henry, who didn't have a good match, and that's an issue because this is a player who is moving to a big club in Asia from the Vancouver Whitecaps, and he didn't really deliver for you here. But I would have started with the back line the way they did, with it kind of similar to what the U.S. did, with a center back playing left back. So, okay, if you have Miller on the left, you pick your 2 center backs, Vittoria and Henry this time. You had Cornelius there last time. And then Larea as your right back. Okay. If you're getting overrun early, you can drop Davies into a wingback role and play a line of 5 and play a 5-4-1 because it's a match that you only need a result, like you said. So you give up that first goal early. Maybe that's when you say, all right, this whatever reason this isn't working, let's settle into the game. Let's get 5-4-1. Let's get 5-3-2 right now. And let's settle in. Knock the ball around a little bit, take the air out of it, and find our footing. But instead, you give up a second goal, and you're pretty much done at that point. Third goal, game's over in 30-plus minutes. You're not finding 3 goals if you're Canada in that situation. So I disagree with the idea of that, just because you didn't do it a month ago. So I don't think anything's really changed in terms of how good of a left back he is. It felt like you're overthinking it if you're John Herdman. So it didn't work. It didn't work, and you have to question him on that because he did something very different a month prior that did work. Why change it based off his reasoning as to what he said a month later? Doesn't make much sense.
And then the last thing that we have currently having to do with the MNT match, Shiva says there was really nothing from the match against Canada that makes me feel better about the team. It was not pretty nor promising. And she wants to know if we have stats from the game, chances created, shots, etc.
I don't have Opta numbers.
I've got basics right in front of me.
Yeah, chances created, I don't think I have access to that anywhere. Let me check one thing real quick for you to definitively say that. But I don't want to be too harsh on it because, look, you had to get a result. This is not a game that's for show. It's not about, style points. It's about just winning. And they did that. So you can't – we can't say that we want to see results and then get deep and critical in how the results happen. That's not really fair, and I don't want to be that. So they did what they had to do. Okay. But they're not going to beat a whole lot of teams playing that way. And that's going to be the challenge going forward, is they have to be better than that. They have to be sharper. If you're going to be a team that tries to build possession out of the back, well, you have to be able to connect passes. And the possession, I don't care. I see people like, oh, well, see, possession's bad. No, possession's not bad. It's what you do with the possession. If you have the ball, you should be able to create more opportunities than the opponent. Should, being the key word there. The U.S. didn't have the ball here, but they were able to create opportunities on set pieces. They were able to create opportunities in a counter situation and threaten Canada that way. Canada had 65% of the ball, but they didn't do anything with it. And that's important. You have to know who you are and what you can be. And that's what I don't know about the U.S. yet. I think we know at this point that Greg Berhalter wants to be a possession-based team. And there's nothing wrong with that. The problem is when push comes to shove right now for the U.S., and that shoving happens when Mexico lines up on the other side of the field. Because the teams in CONCACAF that the U.S. plays outside of Mexico, they can control possession and they can control games. They have not shown an ability to control possession against Mexico. All right. Can you find a different way to play and be effective? And that's the question. Because you're going to have to go through Mexico. It's not like you're waiting on the draw. We got a tough draw this time. No, Mexico's always going to be there. So if you can't beat Mexico with this way of playing, can you be a dual purpose? Can you be able to play one way against teams that you have more talent than, and then have a different way of playing against Mexico? Can you go defend and counter? Could you go with a press? Could you do different things? Okay. It's tough, but can you do it? You need to figure this out, because you have not shown an ability to be able to control a game against Mexico ever. And Mexico isn't going away. So how do they handle that? And then that's not even getting into World Cup situations where you're playing teams from around the world that are better than you, that have more talent than you. Games that you're not going to be guaranteed to be able to control possession. So I just don't know what that next level thinking is for Greg Berhalter. I think we know that the possession is what he wants to do. Okay, good. Fine with that. Well, it hasn't been good enough yet, but that's what he wants to do. All right, I can understand that. There's logic behind playing that way, absolutely. But when you play teams that you're unable to control that possession against, then what? And we don't have an answer to that yet. And that's something that's going to become an issue when you get into these CONCACAF Nations League semifinals and final. Can they win games where they are not the better team? Because right now, they've lost games where they are the better team. Can they win games where they're not the better team? And I don't really know yet. Haven't seen any inkling of it just yet. So we'll find out. But they did enough, and you can't take that away. They did enough. They did what they had to do. They get their goals off of set pieces here, and they win the match that they had to win. It's a step. Baby step, but it's a step. Now they have another one to do the same thing on Tuesday. And then you get into a game that you need to win to set up another final with Mexico. And you have to show that progress that Ernie Stewart's talking about, that Greg Berhalter's talking about. You're going to have a direct basis for comparison, because it's going to be about a year later, after the Gold Cup final where you were thoroughly outplayed. Now, how do you play against Mexico a year later? Where is the development? Where is the process? Where is that progress? Hopefully we'll find out. They got to get past the semifinal first, but hopefully we'll find out. Until then, we're going to move on to MLS and the Expansion Draft, which will take place tomorrow. The protected lists have been filed. The players that are available to be drafted are posted. We'll get into that process. We'll get into some players that jump out and grab your attention and what this could mean for Atlanta United and the rest of the league. We'll get into all of that right after this.
Today's show is presented by Appolinsky & Associates, personal injury lawyers with over 30 years of experience, supporters of Atlanta United, Faction, and Inter-Atlanta Youth Football Club. If you've been hurt in a wreck, contact Steve today at steve@aa-legal.com or call in 24/7 at 404-377-9191. The initial consultation is free.
A ranger station.
I'd like to report a bear hug.
Okay.
I put out my campfire and Smokey Bear hugged me.
So you drowned the fire, you stirred it, drowned it again, and felt that it was cold?
Uh-huh.
Yep, he's just letting you know you did good.
Bear hug from Smokey Bear. Status update.
I'm gonna let you go now. There are many ways to start a fire, but one sure way to put it out. Learn how you can do your part at SmokeyBear.com.
Sponsored by the U.S. Forest Service Ad Council and your state forester.
We know that every driver is different, and a one-size policy does not fit all. That's why Country Financial offers a variety of discounts, so you get the coverage you need and the savings you deserve. From good driver to good student, multi-policy to multi-car, we've got a discount to suit every driver. Call Jason Wright at 678-568-6871 today to see what you could save. On Facebook at Jason Wright Agency or by phone at 678-568-6871. Discounts vary by state. Policies issued by Country Mutual Insurance Company, Country Preferred Insurance Company, or Country Casualty Insurance Company, Bloomington, Illinois.
Every hiring manager knows that a company is only as good as the people it's made from. So where do you find the best people? That may surprise you.
Meet the grads of life. Young adults of unique determination and experience. An ideal fit for your company in an entry-level position, internship, or even mentorship. They might not have every qualification you typically look for, but they're exactly who your company needs.
This is talent worth knowing about.
Go to gradsoflife.org to learn how to find, cultivate, and train this great pool of untapped talent. Brought to you by the Ad Council and gradsoflife.org.
Welcome back. Final segment, hour number 1, SDH, November 18th, one day away from the expansion draft where Miami and Nashville will get 5 picks each. Look, the process has been massively confusing, which is not a surprise, but man, it doesn't have to be so confusing. I really wish that MLS would get better at these types of situations because people try to explain it. We try very hard to explain it, and then we get caught giving the wrong information, and I was one of them. And the folks on the Atlanta United subreddit didn't call me out in a bad way, but called me out because I had said something, and I went back to explain, like, look, in the past, MLS has said players who are not part of the Generation Adidas program have to be protected. All that's the same. But in the past, they made it clear, or at least more clear, I guess is maybe the better way to put it, that players would graduate the Generation Adidas program, and you know that status before you go into the expansion draft. All right, so this got really quiet, and there were a lot of conflicting tweets that were put out there by Ben Bear, who did a lot of hard work in guessing who would be available and all those types of things. But Ben works for MLS Digital, and he had wrong information and put it out there. And when you see an MLS Digital employee put information out there, you have to assume that it is correct from the league. So that affected my thinking because Ben tweeted out 2 different tweets that completely threw me off. One, on November 14th, he said, Robinson is still a Generation Adidas. Well, the next day, MLS posted a list of players who had graduated Generation Adidas. Nothing to do with his contract, which is a new one, which would take him out of that program. But the next day, MLS quietly dropped a list of players who had graduated or who were still Generation Adidas for 2020, and Robinson and Mo Adams weren't on it. Okay, so that was quietly dropped. So you're first getting a report from an MLS employee that he's still Generation Adidas, so he doesn't have to be protected. So this is why when we did the protected list on Wednesday on Stoppage Time, it's like, well, we look really stupid, but kind of we ended up not looking stupid. It's baffling because then on the 15th at 10:25 in the morning, Ben tweeted Generation and quoting the rules of the expansion draft that were posted by Major League Soccer. Generation Adidas players who have not been graduated at the end of the 2019 MLS season are automatically protected. Clubs do not have to use a protected slot on them. Okay, so I would read that as when the 2019 season ended, if you were Generation Adidas, you don't have to be protected for this expansion draft. I think that's how Ben took it. Well, that was incorrect. because it was after the updated list was posted. Because you go back and do the math on the Atlanta United roster, taking the players that are eligible to be picked in the expansion draft, and you work backwards from there, and you take the homegrown players out of it because they're automatically protected, you see that Mo Adams and Miles Robinson had to be protected. It's the only way the numbers make sense. Please, MLS, please, 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 just make this stuff easier to understand and post it correctly. Because we get off on these tangents and back and forth, and it's just so frustrating for people in this situation. We're trying to talk about it in an intelligent way and trying to make sense of it and give people the right information, and we're not given the right information to give people the right information, and it just gets so confusing. And when people get confused, what do? They throw their hands up and they walk away. And that's the last thing that you want fans to do in this process, because it's a very interesting process. So, anyway, soapbox, step through, destroyed, thrown off to the side. We know who is eligible for the expansion draft. Are there players that Miami and Nashville could grab and start day one? Yes. Are there some bad contracts available? Yep. And those are probably going to be players that you stay away from. When I went through the list, I ended up pulling probably about, I'm going to guess about 50 names that grabbed my attention one way or another. Now, there's a lot of overlap in teams, because remember, once a team has a player picked, everybody else comes off the board. So there's 3 or 4 players from some teams. Some teams there's more than that. They can only lose one. And that gets into some of the strategy. The other thing to keep in mind is Chicago and San Jose have both made trades with Miami and Nashville. So I think it's a safe assumption to think that neither team will lose anybody in the expansion draft. And that came into play in the San Jose situation for sure, because there was a player that they left unprotected, Marcos Lopez, 19-year-old left back. Didn't play as much as maybe they thought he would. Had some injuries, just kind of struggled in his conversion from playing as a winger at his club in Peru to playing as a left back here. But he's a player who is on a manageable number at 19. He's on $388,000, but he signed through 2023 on that number. And he's a player who has debuted for Peru. So you see that and you're like, man, that's a player I would absolutely pick in the expansion draft, because I can grow with him. He's going to be worth that money, if not this year, next year, and I've got him for 3 more years after that. Yeah, that's my guy. Well, San Jose's made trades with both teams, so it appears that they could get away with leaving a player like that unprotected because he's not going to be picked. So you take that out of the mix, you start going through it. There's some players that jump out at you, and we've seen the mock draft done on MLSsoccer.com, and I don't think there are any crazy rules that they could have gotten wrong this time, so I think it's a fairly accurate assessment of where things could be. There were a few different players that jumped out to me. We'll get into this in the second hour. The strategy is going to be interesting, because you look at the 2 teams involved, Miami and Nashville. Miami has picked up Victor Ulloa, Jay Chapman, Grant Lillard, Drake Callender, homegrown goalkeeper. They've picked those players up since the season ended. Nashville has added Dax McCarty, have added Dave Romney since the season ended. They had more pieces to begin with. So both teams are coming into this with 8-9 players. They're going to need some starters out of this. They're going to need some depth out of this, but they could also elect to pick a player knowing that he has value to somebody else in the league and trade them. And that's what's going to be interesting to me. And Gwen was all over that when that idea came up. There are players in this draft that are young, promising players that, sure, Miami and Nashville could be interested in, but Dallas could be interested in one of these players and say, hey, Miami, you have the first pick. we would like for you to pick this player, and we will trade you X, Y, and Z for that player. Happens all the time. So that plays into it as well. It's going to be interesting. It's going to be a very interesting process tomorrow with this draft. I think both teams will probably come out of it with 2-3 guys that they expect to play some minutes in 2020. Maybe a wild card type of young pick, because there's some young players in this draft that you'd take a flyer on. You think they could develop into something. And I think both teams will probably look at picking someone and then trading them, either back to the team that left them unprotected to get some stuff, or to another team. And I think you'll see that too. There's a lot of goalkeepers available, a lot of potential starting goalkeepers available. There's a lot of left backs available that grabbed my attention. That was the position that had the most depth at it. There's more defenders here available than anything else that grabs my attention. Defenders and goalkeepers, tons of them available. Miami has a goalkeeper. Nashville doesn't yet. Both need defensive help. So I think that's where they're going to probably look to get players that will play minutes in 2020. Beyond that, we'll see. But we'll get into that in hour number 2. So tweet your questions about the expansion draft to us right now at Soccer Down Here. We'll get into it in just a bit, but we're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back.
As a business owner, you know that every year brings new challenges and opportunities. The success of your business demands expertise and focus. And Country Financial can help you keep that focus by helping ensure you have the right insurance protection in place to meet your goals. Jason Wright can help you create a customized insurance plan that has coverages designed just for your business. Give Jason a call at 678-568-6871 or reach him on Facebook at Jason Wright Agency. Coverages vary by state. Policies issued by Country Mutual Insurance Company, Bloomington, Illinois.
Got issues with youth or high school sports? Positive Coaching Alliance can help. PCA is a national nonprofit working to transform youth and high school sports so that every child has a positive character-building youth sports experience. PCA provides live and online workshops to train double-goal coaches whose first goal is winning and whose second, more important goal is teaching life lessons through sports. PCA also has workshops for parents and high school student athletes. For more information, please visit positivecoach.org.
If you've been hurt in a car wreck, contact my friend Steve Apolinsky of Apolinsky & Associates. He's been representing individuals for over 30 years throughout Georgia and Alabama. Email him at steve@aa-legal.com or call him 24/7 at 404-377-9191. The initial consultation is free.
I adopted Bento in 2010 from a shelter. This cat makes me make art. He's always motivating me to draw pictures of him. He just is motivating artistically. He's my best friend, but a lot of people know him as Keyboard Cat.
Keyboard Cat, YouTube star and shelter pet. Amazing adoption stories start in shelters. Start yours today. Visit theshelterpetproject.org to find a pet near you. Brought to you by Maddie's Fund, the Humane Society of the United States, and the Ad Council.
You're listening to Soccer Down Here daily on SDH Networks, a division of OSG Sports. Find us at Soccer Down Here on Facebook and Twitter. The time is now the top of the hour. Peep, y'all.
We're still trying to figure out the way these rules have been written and explained, and it was always written the way that it is now about if you're a GA player at the end of the 2019 season. They just didn't say that we're going to be reviewing that status before the end of the 2019 season, which they always have. So that's why this whole thing was so complicated. I wish that we could have made it easier for everybody to understand. I wish that it was easier for us to understand, but sometimes it's just you bang your head against the wall. Eventually, it gets posted, and then it's like, oh, yeah, okay, well, now I understand. So now we have a list of players that we know can be drafted. We know where we're at this point. There are some names that jump out at you for Miami, for Nashville, or potentially for trade. I believe we had a question about this from Katie Weaver.
Yeah, she just was looking for analysis on the protected and unprotected lists. She hasn't looked at any other side other than Atlanta. She wanted to know if there are any surprises, and then she also had a question about a Mikey Ambrose update.
Well, there's no update on Mikey Ambrose, and I mean, Mikey posted a goodbye to Atlanta United. There can't be an update, and this is something that when we talk about the process for players after the season, it is, again, it's so convoluted and it's so complicated. He can't go anywhere he wants, so that there's no update right now. Right now, he is available in the expansion draft, so he could be picked by Miami or Nashville. If you work backwards from his statement, he's not coming back to Atlanta because he is either out of contract or his option was not picked up, and we don't know if there was an option or not. Either way, he's not going to come back to Atlanta. He doesn't qualify for free agency because of his age, so he would go through the re-entry draft process. If he is not picked through either Stage 1 or Stage 2 of the re-entry draft, then he could go sign where he wants. So there can't be an update until Stage 2 of the re-entry draft is completed because he could be picked. Stage 1 would be basically you're taking him on either the option on his contract if he has one, or I believe it's the same amount as last year or maybe up to a certain raise. I'm not sure. But Stage 1 of the re-entry draft, you're limited in you have to sign them to X. Stage 2, you pick their rights and you can renegotiate a deal. If you wait to see if somebody gets through both stages, then they are a free agent and they can go wherever they want. So that's where Mikey is at right now. That's why there can't be an update, because he's still got stages to go through in the MLS world. The expansion draft's the first one, and he's a player who was picked in the expansion draft by Atlanta United. Could be picked here. I think there's probably two other players on the Atlanta list that grab people's attention more. I think Alec Can has to be one of those, because Alec Can could step in and be a starter for Miami or Nashville day one. There's a few other goalkeepers in that situation. Maybe one that it's hard to say if there's a surprise or not in who's available, because we don't know contract situations on everybody. So we don't know, did they have an option that was very high and a team is hoping that they're picked up by somebody else? We don't know behind the scenes. Like, reportedly, Evan Bush has been shopped around by Montreal. They're ready to move on. Well, Evan Bush is a starting goalkeeper in this league. He's also on a fairly high contract. Not as much as, maybe he's not as attractive in the expansion draft as an Alec Can, as a Brian Rowe. Brian Rowe played as well as he could for Orlando last year, and he was on a manageable contract at just under $100,000 a year. He's 31 years old. He's a starter in this league. Could he be a guy who starts for Miami while Drake Callender gets adjusted to the pro game? Yep. Nashville doesn't have a goalkeeper right now. So Brian Rowe, Alec Can, other goalkeepers I look at that could be starters in this. Cody Cropper, 26 years old, on a very manageable contract from last year. Jeff Attinella, a little bit more money, but a player who has started in this league. You look at some players who haven't started as much. Matt Lampson's another one who started in this league on a good deal, $71,000 last year. But you look at guys who haven't started in this league that you might want to take a chance on. Brad Stuver, 28 years old, $100,000 last year. Adam Grenwis, if you decide that Rowe isn't who you want to get from Orlando, if you want to go Grenwis, did well in the Open Cup, 27. You've got some young goalkeepers in Ben Lundgaard, Jimmy Haig, all young guys that could be in the Tyler Miller type of mold, that were young, playing behind somebody. You decide, you know what, they can be a starter. We like what we've seen. We scouted them. We know this guy, blah, blah, blah. And you pick them up, and they're your starter day one. It worked out for Tyler Miller. Could it work out for any of those guys? Goalkeeper, I wouldn't be shocked to see both teams pick a goalkeeper. But then that affects who's available, and that's what's so tricky about this expansion draft. Let's say Alec Can is who Gary Smith in Nashville likes, and that's who he wants, and Miami takes their first pick, and then Nashville picks Alec Can first. Well, that takes the other Atlanta player that everybody has expected to see drafted here, Brandon Vasquez. That would take him off the board. That's very possible that it could happen. That's why, because of those two being available, and Florentine Pogba maybe is the wild card here. We know he's on an option. Maybe somebody says, you know what, he can be my starting center back. I'm going to go ahead and pick him, and I'll pick up the option, and that's who I'm going to go with. Maybe Dion Pereira is another wild card because of his age. He's young. He's shown you a little bit. He is an international. But I think it's Can and Vasquez are the top two available from Atlanta. And it's just going to be down to which team jumps at an Atlanta player first.
For me, I was looking at these lists, and there were the goalkeeper situation that you were talking about. That's what was jumping out to me. It's like you have Evan Bush, you have Tyler Miller, you have Cody Cropper, Brian Rowe. But, once again...
Hold on. Tyler Miller, let's be clear on why Tyler Miller's here. All the reports have been that he's going to go overseas. So you're not going to pick him.
Right.
So it doesn't matter that he's available.
Right.
We've talked about it. All the reports are that he's going to go potentially to Portugal. So
right.
I'm assuming he's out of contract, according to that. And you're not going to waste a pick on a guy that, you might have his rights, but he might be playing in Portugal.
Yeah, he might jet, be
you
someplace
can't
else.
Really afford to risk that. So that's why there's some players that are on the list that are in those types of situations that you're probably going to avoid.
And then you look at a Philadelphia and you see a Harris Medunjanin on the list. And for me, that's, do you take the salary jump that's associated with a player like that?
At his age, why would you take him for Miami or Nashville?
Right. I mean, for me, the first thing that stuck out was just the contract in and of itself, and not wanting to invest the kind of dollars that are in his current contract. So I was looking at that first and foremost.
I don't even know if that's the issue. I mean, Medunjanin is 34. You're not going to win. Nashville's not going to win day one. Miami, you have Victor Ulloa, who right now is who you would pencil into that kind of role. I don't know if you want to take a player of that age and that contract to be an average team or above average team in Miami's case if they put everything together the way that we expect. Medunjanin would be a player that would put you over the top. I don't think either team's going to be near a top.
Yeah.
So it's not worth that type of investment. Unless you are picking him to then trade him to a team that could go over the top with that type of move.
True. Yeah, I mean, you look at Orlando City and you see Will Johnson, Sasha Kljestan, Sane, and then you have Brian Rowe. And so, I mean, you have age, you have salary, you have all of those things to keep in mind. And the theory that you had with a Harris Medunjanin, do you do that where you take an asset so you can in turn send him to someplace else?
Well, yeah, but you're not going to take Sasha Kljestan and do that because he's not an asset. At this, the way he's fallen off, like, no. More often than not, you're going to take a player that is going to be on a good salary and a player that you think can contribute. And there's plenty of those available. The guys who jump out to me, the one that's on a big salary that I think could be a good pickup for somebody would be Juan Agudelo. Now, Agudelo would probably make more sense for Miami than he would for Nashville. Nashville has Cameron Lancaster and Daniel Rios, and you wonder if Gary Smith is expecting those two guys to be your main two forwards in MLS. It's going to be a jump for either one. But do you want to add another forward into that mix like an Agudelo? If you're going to add another forward, if you're Nashville, I would think you would add a proven goal scorer from outside the league instead of a player like Agudelo who's played a little bit of everywhere. I still think Agudelo is a very talented player and could be useful for anybody. He's 26. You think he's older, but he's not. He broke through so young. He's on $605,000 last year. So just over the DP threshold, you can easily use allocation money to bring that down. I think he would make a lot of sense for Miami because he would be a player that you have Julian Carranza from Bonfield, 19 years old right now as a forward. You're probably going to get another forward. Agudelo could be a second forward. He could be a winger. He's played central midfield as well, like a number 10 kind of role. He's a very technical player, and it feels like that's where Miami is headed. He's really the only one on any kind of a larger contract that grabs my attention out of the pool. And when I say larger contract, I'm talking like over $400,000 a year. He was the only one that really got my attention. And maybe I'm still biased because I think he could really be a better player than we've seen so far. I think he still has that talent, but he's the one that I could see Miami taking a shot on. Maybe Nashville, but more likely Miami.
When it comes to the approach of the two sides, and I know that a lot of it has to do with philosophy and all that kind of stuff, what kind of a player are you looking for, since we don't know and we know the front office in Miami, but we don't know who the coach is obviously yet. But when it comes to a player like a team like Nashville and a coach like Gary Smith, what kind of player are you anticipating him going for?
I mean, it's a little hard to say. I think that you're looking at a team that's probably going to play a 3-5-2. That's what Gary Smith has generally opted for when he's had all of his options available to him. And you look at what this team has currently, you've got 3 different central midfielders in Anibal Godoy, Dax McCarty, Derek Jones. You're pretty good there. You could play all 3 together. You could play 2 with a number 10. You've got David Accam, who could play as a more traditional winger. Could he play as a wing back in a 3-5-2? Maybe. Could he play as a number 10 or a second forward? Yeah, I think he could play as that second forward. I don't know about the number 10 role. Hani Mukhtar would likely be that number 10, and he's a designated player, so you're probably going to pair him up with 2 of Godoy, McCarty, Jones on a regular basis. You've got Lancaster and Rios up top. You've only got Romney as a true defender. You don't have a goalkeeper yet. Now, we don't know who Gary Smith is going to bring from Nashville SC that's on a USL deal. That has not been announced as of yet. Could he bring Matt Pickens with him as a goalkeeper? It's possible. I think he needs to upgrade there, but it's possible. I don't know if there's anybody else that just immediately jumps out to me as, okay, if he brings them up, they're going to play significant minutes. So you're going to have to bolster that back line. You're going to need center backs, because if you want to play 3, you really need 5 center backs. And the guys that jump out to me at center back in this draft, obviously Forrest Lasso is one who was on loan to Nashville. So I don't know if Miami would be interested in Lasso. You might be able to wait till your last pick to take him, or it's already been announced that Cincinnati's not picking up his option. He would go through the waiver process because he's only been in the league 1 year. Could Nashville wait and try to get him there? Don't know. It seems too obvious. So it's kind of a wait and see, but Lasso to Nashville would make a lot of sense. Other center backs, Brent Kallman from Minnesota, veteran, played well in this league, 29 years old. He was on $152,000 last year. It's not crazy money. He could be one that would make a lot of sense for a Nashville. I think for Nashville, the one I would grab is Sebastian Ibeagha from New York City. And I know a lot of people have jumped about Ben Sweat as the New York City pick. I would go Ibeagha because you're talking about a guy who's 27. You're talking about a guy who was on $75,000 last year, so you got a great contract type of number. He was the USL Defender of the Year in 2017 with San Antonio. He's played 2 years for New York City, and he's played. He hasn't just been on the roster. He's played a fair bit. And I'll go back to the game against Atlanta at Yankee Stadium where he shut down Tito Villalba, playing as a right back, which we hadn't seen him play. He showed a lot in that, and I think he showed good performances in his other games with New York City. I think he's a guy who can make that step up and play more minutes, and Nashville would be a spot where he would get him. So Ibeagha is one that I would jump on. Now then, you get back to the same situation, though. If Miami decides that they want Ben Sweat, and they take Ben Sweat ahead of Nashville taking Ibeagha, well, then you're screwed. That's what's so difficult about this. And you have to weigh both, all right, I like this player, but there's a player that on that team that Miami might want ahead of me. So how early do I take this guy? It's tough. It's very tough. But Lasso, Coleman, Ibeagha are the three that grabbed my attention. Center back for Nashville, Florentine Pogba would be a possibility as well. And that would change the dynamic about Can, Vasquez, other options from Atlanta United. Pogba could be a guy that Nashville says, you know what, we'll pick up that option. I would assume the option is not a massive jump from $324,000, which is what he made last year. Nashville could say, we'll pick up that option because he's going to play 30 games for us. And that's a solid number. We saw enough that we liked. Could absolutely do that. And he would be one that I think Nashville would have to take with their first pick because of Brandon Vasquez, and Vasquez being a guy that Paul McDonough was involved in signing. And he's still a young player. I mean, Brandon Vasquez is still a guy at 21 who has a long career ahead of him. Miami could decide to take him as a forward and play him key minutes or use him as a reserve role. And if Nashville wants Pogba, or if Nashville says, you know what, we want Alec Can to be our goalkeeper day one, they're probably going to have to grab him first. And that's where the strategy of the expansion draft gets really, really tricky. But center back for Nashville is what grabs my attention. Wing back, if you're going to play a 3-5-2, and you got a ton of options there. You know, outside backs, you've got Justin Morrow, who's played as a wing back and done a very good job with that with Toronto. 32 years old, $320,000 last year. Worth it. I think he's absolutely worth it. He would give a team veteran experience. He's won things in this league. He's got national team experience. If you decide maybe that's a little bit too much money, you've got Waylon Francis from Columbus, who does not count as an international. You've got Jimmy Medranda from Kansas City. You've got Hector Jimenez, who can play on either side of the back line, 31 years old, another veteran, $200,000. You've got Zarek Valentin from Portland, 28 years old, $160,000 last year. Seth Sinovic, left back, 32 years old, $143,000 last year. Ashton Morgan from Toronto. If you decide Morrow's too much, you want a left back from Toronto, well, go get Ashton Morgan, 28 years old, $134,000 last year. Nashville, for me, it's defense, it's outside backs, goalkeeper, because there's so many potential ones available between Cropper, Rowe, Can. Those are the three that I think could step. Lampson. Okay, so those are the four that could step in and start day one. For Miami, that's where it gets a little trickier. Like, without knowing who the manager will be, it's a little hard to know exactly what they're looking for here. There's a few players with Miami expected to sign a lot of bigger names and bolder moves that just hasn't materialized yet. Maybe Miami looks at young guys to take a flyer on for development. And the one that it stands out to me is Didi Traore, left back from the LA Galaxy. On a minimum contract, he's 20 years old. He does take up an international spot, but Traore has shown a ton of potential, first with Galaxy 2 and then the Galaxy this year. I was surprised he was left unprotected. He would seem to be a fit for Miami. A young player like that you think can blossom for you, and you're not asking them to do a ton day one. The other one like that is maybe Michigan Galena from Philadelphia. Winger, can play up top. Another minimum contract. He's 19. He does take up an international spot, so you'd have to be a little concerned about that. Hassan Ndam, who Cincinnati picked up in the expansion draft. They picked up his option, but they had to leave him unprotected. A young center back at 21 that you could develop. So Miami, I think, goes a little bit younger. I think Nashville goes a little bit more veteran experience, and Nashville needs defense. Miami, they need defense too, but it's just so hard to predict what Miami does here because you're expecting bigger things from Miami that haven't materialized just yet.
And looking at financials quickly, Forrest Lasso, his base was at $70,000 and full compensation over $77,000. Agadello is at $575 for base salary.
Full compensation is the only number that matters. Don't worry about the other.
$605.
Yeah,
$605 for Agadello.
Yeah, that's what we were talking about. Yeah, 605 is the highest number of a player that I think could get picked here. You know, maybe Miami gets crazy and takes a Nico Gaitan because he's a guy that I don't know why Chicago would necessarily leave him unprotected, other than maybe they're just hoping somebody grabs that salary. But
yeah,
I mean, Gaitan could be a playmaker for Miami for the first year and maybe the first couple of years. Could absolutely be a fit there. But do they want to do that, or do they want to go sign whoever they want? I think they'd rather take the latter and go sign whatever they want to sign from outside the league.
Eichmann says it's a hard expansion draft for Nashville and Miami with the CBA looming. Some of these, quote, big, end quote, contracts could be more than manageable in a couple of months.
I don't think the CBA I don't think it makes a Harris Medunian salary manageable. I really don't. And I don't think the CBA has a dramatic effect on 2020. I think it's going to be a stronger effect on 2021. So I don't think it changes the strategy. I still think both teams are looking for manageable contracts. They're looking for Nashville more minutes than Miami. Miami maybe will take some younger players. I don't think either one is looking at big name designated players here. I'd be very surprised if they do.
And then Katie's also wondering if, with Ambrose, is there some kind of a possibility of a backdoor deal with either Nashville or Miami to ultimately protect our other unprotecteds?
Well, you have to think logically about how that could happen. The only team that could happen with is Miami because they have the first pick. You can't do a backdoor deal with Nashville where Miami takes Brandon Vasquez first. You know what I mean? So, like, the only team you could do that with would be Miami. They would then, I guess, have to take Ambrose to protect the others. I mean, I guess it's possible. It doesn't really make sense, though, logically, because if they wanted Ambrose, the only way it would make sense is if Atlanta says, you know what, we can't protect everybody we want to protect. We know you want Mikey Ambrose. We're going to leave him exposed. You can sign him to a new deal, but Miami, you have to take him first. Because then that would protect Vasquez and Can and anybody else on the list. That would be the only way it would make sense. And I just don't know if Mikey Ambrose is worth that to Miami. I think Brandon Vasquez would be more worth it for them. Maybe Alec Can would be more worth it for them. But I think either one is more worth it than Mikey Ambrose. So I don't think there's a backdoor deal. This wouldn't make sense.
Shiva wants to know, if Justin Miram doesn't get picked, does it mean he's back with Atlanta United? And also, if Atlanta's going to offer Gressel and LGP's new contracts, when do you think that'll be?
I'm not in the front office, so a couple things. Just because a player's on this list doesn't mean that they're leaving the club. You can only protect 12, and you've got it. Most teams have more than 12 guys that are under contract for 2020. So just because you're on this list doesn't mean that you're gone. Now, these situations are different. When it comes to Justin Miram, I've heard conflicting reports. I've heard some people say that he is out of contract, which means he would... I'll have to check and see if he would qualify for free agency. I don't think so. I'm pretty sure he doesn't have the years of service in the league, but I might be wrong. Let me double check that real quick because this is actually important. So if he is out of contract, he would qualify for free agency. So he could go as a free agent. Now, we have not heard that definitively or not. If he is in an option year, then Atlanta would make the decision on picking up his option, which would likely be somewhere around the number he was on last year totally, and Columbus picked up some of that number last year. Atlanta didn't have that full hit on their cap. It's over $600,000. Or you could sign him to a new deal. So that one's complicated because you have to make a decision at 30 years old. Is Justin Merrim worth $600,000+ a year in the system that Frank DeBoer wants to play and with the talent around him? That might be a stretch. Now, could you convince him to sign a deal where he takes less money than he was getting paid this year for more security? Potentially. But there could be other teams that offer him a better deal. So we don't know his contract situation. So with him, it's complete and utter speculation. With LGP and Gressel, I mean, you're up against a couple different things depending on how you want to do it. Your options have to be declared by the 21st. So you're not going to let those two players walk on a free. So you're going to pick up the option. Now, in a perfect world, you know where things stand in terms of negotiating a long-term deal, or at least you know where the situation stands. They're not going to walk for a free and not be here in 2020. I don't think anybody is believing that's going to happen, but please don't. It wouldn't make any logical sense. You're going to pick up the option, and then you are either going to sign to a long-term deal, a new contract, or you are going to trade them or transfer them. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. Because I think there's just been a lot of confusion here. They were protected. That doesn't necessarily mean that they've signed a new deal. They're really completely unrelated. The biggest thing to keep in mind here is if a player is picked in the expansion draft, you get $50,000 in GAM. So most teams did not want to leave a player unprotected that they thought they could get more than that for in the open market. That's the way you have to think about this. So the players that Atlanta protected, if they're going to move them, and some of them they could, they feel like they can get more than $50,000. Now, some other teams have contracts that, man, they like to get out from under if they want to. And some of them are looking at it and saying, well, nobody's going to pick Harris Medunjanin. We can leave him out there, and we can protect somebody that we can't afford to lose because we don't think anybody's going to pick Medunjanin. That's where you get into the game of chicken that the expansion draft turns into. But from the Atlanta perspective, I don't think it really tells you anything about the long-term futures of Merrim, LGP, Gressel, period. Whether they were protected or unprotected. I don't think this tells you anything long-term unless Justin Merrim is picked in this draft. And I just think there's other players that are probably more attractive in an expansion draft scenario than Merrim from the Atlanta side.
Ike Mann is now also playing Football Manager. He's saying to trade an international slot to Miami for Garber Bucks and trade Mikey to Nashville. Hashtag silly season.
Okay. I mean, silly season and Fantasyland too.
Yeah.
And Candyland and any other board game you want to play.
Chutes and Ladders.
I guess.
Jorge B. with a soccer over there question this morning.
Okay.
Gabriel Pellegrino is not seeking re-election as Gimnasia president. What are the possibilities of Diego leaving? Hashtag son los panqueques.
Yeah, I'm not sure the specifics on it. I did see this start to bubble up. Anything can happen when you get into these elections with clubs and situations like this. It's not just an Argentine thing. I mean, you see it at Real Madrid and Barcelona, where you go into a presidential election and you've got guys saying, well, if I'm elected, I will go sign David Beckham. And it didn't happen. Barcelona tried to play that one. Or I will go sign this player, and then it does happen. It's so hard to tell. And a club like Gimnasia that is probably going to get relegated. You know, if you get a pragmatic president who comes in and says, do we really want to deal with the Diego Maradona madness? Do we really want to pay him because he's not working for free, he's not working for cheap? Do we really want to do this and get the same results? We're going to get relegated. It doesn't matter at this point. Let's go ahead and get ready to be a second division team. It could happen. There's just no telling. So welcome to politics and welcome to drama. And whenever Maradona's involved, there's drama. And add the politics to it, things could get very interesting with Gimnasia.
Where are they right now in the mix for relegation and staying up?
Well, they're in the bottom of it, but it's pretty narrow margins between them and some other teams. So you've got, if you're Gimnasia, you've got about 20 games left between the rest of the Superliga season and the Copa de la Superliga, which is like a mini league that does count in the relegation table. So you got about 20 games, and you probably need to win. I mean, without being able to control the teams around you, you probably need to win half of them. Maradona's done pretty well there, actually. Like, they have not been an easy out, but that would be above and beyond the performances they've had in the last 3 years. So he's not a miracle worker.
But then, side note, that is one of my favorite T-shirts in the store, by the way. In our store.
Yes. And where can they get that?
I believe that's teespring.com/soccer down here, I believe.
Yes.
So, yes, having the Sonos Panqueques, that is an absolute hoot. And kudos to you and your creative brain for putting all that stuff out there on the store. We are caught up on the Twitters. Yes. If we're caught up on the Twitters, sir, where would you like to go next?
I'm going to go to a break, and then we're going to come back and get into some rumor and innuendo around MLS right after this.
Today's show is presented by Appolinsky & Associates, personal injury lawyers with over 30 years of experience, supporters of Atlanta United, Faction, and Inter-Atlanta Youth Football Club. If you've been hurt in a wreck, contact Steve today at steve@aa-legal.com or call in 24/7 at 404-377-9191. The initial consultation is free.
A ranger station.
I'd like to report a bear hug.
Okay.
I put out my campfire and Smokey Bear hugged me.
So you drowned the fire, you stirred it, drowned it again, and felt that it was cold?
Uh-huh.
Yep, he's just letting you know you did good.
Bear hug from Smokey Bear. Status update.
I'm gonna let you go now. There are many ways to start a fire, but one sure way to put it out. Learn how you can do your part at SmokeyBear.com.
Sponsored by the U.S. Forest Service Ad Council and your state forester.
We know that every driver is different, and a one-size policy does not fit all. That's why Country Financial offers a variety of discounts, so you get the coverage you need and the savings you deserve. From good driver to good student, multi-policy to multi-car, we've got a discount to suit every driver. Call Jason Wright at 678-568-6871 today to see what you could save. On Facebook at Jason Wright Agency or by phone at 678-568-6871. Discounts vary by state. Policies issued by Country Mutual Insurance Company, Country Preferred Insurance Company, or Country Casualty Insurance Company, Bloomington, Illinois.
Every hiring manager knows that a company is only as good as the people it's made from. So where do you find the best people? That may surprise you.
Meet the grads of life. Young adults of unique determination and experience. An ideal fit for your company in an entry-level position, internship, or even mentorship. They might not have every qualification you typically look for, but they're exactly who your company needs.
This is talent worth knowing about.
Go to gradsoflife.org to learn how to find, cultivate, and train this great pool of untapped talent. Brought to you by the Ad Council and gradsoflife.org.
weird watching on TUDN the transformation of the Estadio Azteca into an NFL venue.
Yeah, it's Kansas City and the Carson Chargers tonight, correct?
Yes.
I just wonder, honestly and legitimately, how many people are going to be there?
A lot. Why do you think there would not be a lot? Because the way you asked that, you would think there's not a lot.
Well, I mean, just in the sense of what's capacity at Estadio Azteca? Like 100?
Something like that. I'm checking now. Yeah, I think it's around 100.
Yeah, I mean, I was just wondering if legitimately there were going to be 100,000 people there, or if it was going to be less, more like a traditional, in quotation marks, NFL crowd.
87,523.
Okay.
And last time they played a game at the Estadio Azteca was November 19th, 2017. New England and Oakland, 77,357 was the number.
Okay.
They've changed the configuration a little bit because the first two times they played, or the first two times there's attendance is listed on the list I'm looking at. Houston Oilers and Dallas Cowboys in 1994 preseason, 112,000. First regular season game was 2005. The Cardinals hosted the 49ers and 103,000.
Wow.
So 2016, Oakland played a home game there, 76,000. 2017, 77,000. The Chiefs-Rams game was moved because of field conditions last year.
Right.
It didn't happen.
Right. That was what I remember, too.
So, I mean, they'll get over 70,000 for sure.
Okay. Just, you sit there and you wonder if just two teams that may have a tie, are they going to get that 77 or close to capacity or not? That's just generally my question.
Yeah, I mean, there's, American football is not a small thing in Mexico, so it'll draw. I mean, and it's one game a year, so it's a special event too. So it'll draw. It'll be a big crowd. We'll see what the field looks like afterwards. I think the last couple of times it's been pretty torn up, and it's affected Club America games.
And Nick has a thought this morning about the Gimnasia situation.
Okay.
And is wondering if SDH sponsors Gimnasia, says Diego can wear the SDH logo, or do we sponsor Defensa y Justicia because they need a 97 sponsor on their jersey?
I think if we want Diego to wear the Soccer Down Here logo, we would have to sponsor Gimnasia because sponsoring Diego directly would probably be more expensive.
Yes.
So that would probably be the best option, although it's kind of unknown how long he'll be there. I think Defensa y Justicia will be around longer than Maradona at Gimnasia, so I will go with raising enough money to sponsor Defensa y Justicia and have our logo on an Argentine Superliga kit.
And we'll talk about that, I'm sure, and other things tonight at the Brewhouse Cafe with their 9,412 televisions, as we have soccer over there starting at 6 o'clock.
Yep, 6 to 8. We'll talk Nations League, all the Nations Leagues. We'll talk Argentina, Brazil, both at the senior level and at the U23 level. Ezequiel Barco was really good for Argentina yesterday against Brazil. It was a typical Argentina-Brazil game. People getting kicked, lots of intrigue, lots of arguing, lots of cheap shots, lots of simulation, lots of things because it's Argentina and Brazil, and they do not get along on the pitch. But Argentina got the win at the senior level, and they got the win at the U23 level. And Ezequiel Barco is a big part of that, the U23 level. So congrats to him. Let's get into some of the rumors around MLS as silly season ramps up. So you've got some players that were in the league in 2019 that might not be in the league in 2020, and the one that grabs your attention first is Nicholas Ladero from the Seattle Sounders. Nico Moreno, who is with the Pulso Sports Network in Seattle, is reporting that two top Mexican clubs have started communication with the Sounders about buying Ladero. Cruz Azul has been public in their interest in the past. Are they one of them? Don't know yet. But Ladero leaving Seattle would be a big deal, and I don't think it would happen without a large amount of money coming to the Pacific Northwest to make that happen. But at this point, Ladero's won 2 MLS Cups. Could he be tempted to go? Absolutely. For Seattle, it'd be the worst possible timing with CONCACAF Champions League starting up in February. We'll have to see. Left back Brad Smith for the Sounders, not a guarantee to come back either. He was on loan from Bournemouth. He's drawing interest from clubs outside of MLS because of his performances with the Sounders. Vito Mannone was on loan in Minnesota from Reading. He's getting the same situation with his strong performances. He's generating interest outside of MLS. So Minnesota wants him back. Might be hard to make that one happen. Not expecting to see him back. Not expecting to see Brad Smith back either. I think you're going to see more situations like these two, though, with clubs that traditionally haven't loaned these types of players to MLS teams. I think English clubs are starting to see, just like players out of South America, that MLS can be a really good shop window for you. So Mannone and Smith are two guys not like 20-year-olds who are trying to break through as professionals. These are seasoned professionals who, for whatever reason, weren't getting time at their clubs that they were under contract to. You loan them to MLS clubs, they do very well, and hey, you've raised their market value. It's a crazy thing that happens when that goes down.
And we're also seeing with MLS and Emerson Hyndman as a local example with things going the other way.
That's a different situation, because that was, I think, always geared towards an eventual move, and he's out of contract. I think Smith and Mannone were sent here because they weren't playing,
right,
and now have raised their value to sell elsewhere. I think Hyndman was one of two things. I mean, he's out of contract in June, so it was, he's coming to the end of his contract. Let's do right by him and move him there, because he could sign a pre-contract right now if you can't get the purchase deal done. You could go ahead and do that. So it's a different situation altogether. That was with an eye towards a move of where he was being loaned to. I don't know if Smith and Mannone was specifically in that regard.
And I wonder if Jessica Charman if her opinions have changed on Mannone with this season from MLS, or if she still thinks that the old Vito Mannone that was at Reading and at Sunderland may still pop up at some point.
He had a great year with Minnesota.
And so with him getting the hardware that he got here, obviously market value for him is pretty high. So I want to see who's going to be interested in him in a return back over the Atlantic.
Other players who could be on the way out, Aaron Long. Sky Sports reporting that Southampton have been offered the chance to sign him. West Ham was the club that was in for him in the fall. The work permit might have been a harder situation at that point. Now it should be easier because he's been pretty well established as a regular with the national team. Marseille is reportedly also interested, and Sky Sports said that the release clause is $6 million. I think you see release clause used a lot of times where it's not accurate. I don't know of many situations where MLS players have actually had a release clause. A release clause is essentially, I don't want to negotiate. I'm just going to pay that money and the player's mine. I think it might be an asking price in this case of $6 million. I'd be surprised if the release clause was that low, because usually the release clause is very high. And it's a starting point that, you want him? Okay, cool. Pay $15 million and he's all yours. It's like, well, we're not paying $15 million. Now let's talk. $6 million is low on a release clause. I don't think that's accurate. Could be wrong. If that's accurate, somebody should snatch him up, because he's worth $6 million right now.
Yeah.
I think that's an asking price, or I think that's a valuation. I don't think that's a release clause.
So traditionally, the idea, the thought pattern behind a release clause is, okay, here's my absolute 100% number, and then you can have him. But
it's
from
the
there,
buy it now price on eBay.
Yeah.
It's the, oh, okay, cool. You don't want to bid. You just want to make sure you get it. All right, pay more than he's worth.
Yeah.
That's a release clause, and usually it's on a very young player and those types of situations. So $6 million, and also remember that that doesn't necessarily mean that's what the price would be in a release clause situation. You see a lot of times, and Juan Fernando Quintero is reportedly in a contract that has a $30 million release clause. That's the reports that are out there. That doesn't mean he's not going to be sold for less. That means, oh, you don't want to negotiate? Pay the release clause and he's all yours. It is the buy it now price. That's the way to think about it.
Yeah.
Carlos Asquez is being linked with a move to Cruz Azul. He was unprotected by Orlando. I thought he's been really good for Orlando. Diego Montalvan of Telemundo is reporting that Cruz Azul is after Asquez. I don't know if he's out of contract. I'm assuming that would be the case if Cruz Azul's interested. I don't know how much of a transfer fee they would pay on him. Mauro Manotas is back in Colombia. He spoke to El Ambito, an outlet in Colombia. He wants to win the Golden Boot this year. He wants to go to Europe. He is potentially in the mix for the Colombian national team, according to Carlos Quiroz, because of how good he has been in Houston. About that move to Europe, there were reports previously about $8.5 million offers on the table. Cruz Azul was one of them, and we've mentioned Cruz Azul with 3 different players now. There was an unnamed European club that was in that ballpark as well. If Houston can get that number up into 8 figures, I think they do it. But I think they would like to do it after the season. If you can get a strong year for Tab Ramos this year with Manotas, and whatever decisions you make when it comes to Ellis, Kyoto, Tomas Martinez, Darwin Quintero, you got a lot of attacking talent. Houston could be good. We'll see what effect Tab Ramos has. I think he would probably be more willing, and I don't know Manotas' contract situation. I'm assuming the way that this is played out, the way this is being talked about, this is not last year of the contract. Maybe there's an option after this. Otherwise, I think you're probably more likely to make a move now. Ellis, this is last year. He has said he wants to play his contract out. I don't know if you can allow that to happen if you're the Dynamo. Kyoto has been all over the place. Can Tab Ramos, get him kind of back on the straight and narrow and get him back to where he can be a consistent performer for you? That might be a challenge. I think Manotas, Darwin Quintero, Tomas Martinez are who you were building around. If you can get something for Kyoto, you probably do it. And if you can move Ellis, I think you have to. You just can't afford to get nothing for him. So we'll see. But Manotas absolutely has the ability to do it. I think he's been a prime example of a guy who has come to MLS and really raised his stock due to strong play. You've got other rumors that are out there. A player linked to Dallas kind of out of nowhere. Roman Filipito. He is French Ligue 1 Nimes is where he's playing currently. He's got 3 goals and 2 assists in 12 matches. 31 years old, left winger. He just arrived there in the summer, which is a little surprising that he would be headed to Dallas so quickly. 400,000 euro is the reported number, and they're saying that it's a done deal essentially. So wait and see on that one. The 2 big ones, now you're getting reports in Italy of Montreal interest in Dries Martins from Napoli, according to reports saying that Thierry Henry really wants to bring him in. And then MLS reported it, and it came initially from Calcio Mercato. Multiple MLS teams considering making an offer for Mario Mandzukic from Juve and Croatian star striker. That's going to have to be a big offer, because it sounds like there are a lot of teams that would like to get Mandzukic into their squad going forward.
You mentioned Manotas and Europe. Is there anybody else off the top of your head that is a quality MLS talent that could go to Europe and succeed? I know that I'm kind of leaving it out there as to league and location, but who else do you think would be on that short list?
It's not a short list. Like, that's the thing. Is like, no, it's not a short list at all. There's a number of players in MLS that could go to Europe and be successful. Start with Atlanta. Joseph, Barco, Pitti. I think those three are obvious. Miles Robinson. Brad Kazan has been there. LGP in the right situation. Franco Escobar in the right situation. That's just one team. I mean, go through the best players in MLS according to who scored last year. Carlos Vela played very well in La Liga. Obviously, Zlatan is going back to Europe. Edward Atuesta reportedly getting interest from Europe. Kasper Shabilko was in Germany before. I think he has the ability to go back. Joseph, we talked about. Pozuelo just came from Europe. Mark Anthony Kaye, I think he has that potential. Diego Rossi likely going to Europe this year. Nico Ladero would be one that it doesn't sound like is being talked about with Europe. He's 30. It might be a little bit past him at this point. I think he could go in the right situation and do well. Jamiro Montero has been in Europe before. Diego Valeri at his age, probably not, but he had the ability to. Carlos Heel just came. Gregos just came. Kai Kamara never really stuck over there at this age. It's past it. Nani came here from Europe. Diego Rubio, I don't know if I'd go there yet. Sebastian Blanco, probably could have. At 31, it's probably not likely. Maxi Morales at 32 came here from Europe. Pedro Santos, older. I mean, MLS players who could play in European leagues and teams, there's 100. Just pulling a random number out. A lot. It's not, like, shocking to think that. So Manotas being one of them, yeah.
How many do you think would have been on that list a couple of years ago by comparison?
Well, I think should have been on the list. Probably not quite as many, but still a lot. Would have been on the list because of perceptions about MLS talent, far less. I think those perceptions are changing. They're still not where they need to be, but it's getting better in terms of how this league is perceived. But, yeah, the league has improved, but it's not like it was crap before. It was perceived as crap, and it was not crap. It's gotten better. But, yeah, there's a ton of players that could go to Europe and play. Whether you're talking young guys, whether you're talking veterans, yeah, there's plenty. Like, it's not this... I don't know how it's seen in Europe. And that ultimately would be the question here, because those are the clubs that are going to be making that decision. But, where would you rather bring in a player from who is, let's say, 24 years old and has been a professional for 3-4 years and done well? Would you rather go get them from Argentina, Brazil, Mexico, or the U.S.? And I think it's going to depend on the player. At that age, you're probably going to go more out of the United States. Younger, you're probably going to go Brazil and Argentina, especially Brazil, because young Brazilian talents get snatched up really young. Argentine talents are getting snatched up younger and younger. Guys are popping up in the first division in Argentina, playing 10, 15 games, and then getting sold for a lot of money. And it's tough. Mexico, you're not seeing as many until very, very recently. Young Mexican talents go over to Europe. You're seeing more young American talents go over to Europe, but I think for MLS, they're in this unique situation where they'll go get young talent from South America and then sell it. They'll also develop young talent here domestically and sell it, or some of that young talent moves even earlier before they really truly get fully developed. I think MLS is in that same market with everybody else. There are a bunch of players who, given the right situation, going to a European club can do well.
So I just thought I would ask.
I mean, the way you ask it was like, it's impossible because MLS is crap, and it's not.
But I think in my mind, as I was asking, I think I was looking at the inverse, and that was what you were getting at also in the second half of the analysis of all the players, not knowing how Europe perceives MLS talent as opposed to how MLS talent should be heading to Europe, I guess.
It's better. I mean, it's definitely changed, and it needs to continue to do that for MLS to make the money that it wants to make, because I think a lot of people have zeroed in on the business of MLS and saying, well, it's got to be TV that changes everything. I think the thing that can change it the most quickly is transfer fees.
Yeah.
I think if MLS is more involved in a smarter way in the transfer market, that can immediately change the P&L statements faster than TV money going up. I think TV money will go up in the next deal, but will it double? Will it go from just under $100 million a year to just under $200 million a year? I don't know if it will. I think it'll go up into the 150, and if you get double what you're getting now, that'd be great. I don't know how realistic it is to expect it. I think maybe after 26 it goes up bigger, but we're talking about a landscape at that point where who knows what TV looks like. And that's where MLS is in a really tough spot, because you might get a big offer from a non-traditional source.
Something Flow-ish.
Well, Flow's not going to be able to offer you that much money.
I mean, something in that vein is what I'm saying.
But you're acting like there's 50 million options like that. There's not. Like, who could legitimately offer the kind of money that would make it worth it for MLS to go everything in a very different way? Amazon?
Yeah, that was what popped into my head.
Probably, maybe a Netflix or a Hulu, I guess. ESPN? I don't know if anybody would offer both the money and the reliability of having things accessible that would make it worth it. So that's why I think it's going to be like 150, 175 million a year. ESPN and Fox will still be involved. Maybe there is a third toe in the water. Maybe it's a game on Amazon Prime. Maybe it's a game on a Yahoo exclusively, whatever. Somebody like that coming in and dipping their toe in. Maybe that does open the door up for a Flow or for somebody else to do something different. Maybe that's where you go from 150 million a year to that 175 or 180 million a year, or maybe get to the double in your number total, because you get somebody to come in and overpay for a slice to show what they can do. But I think your biggest jump in TV would probably be down the road, and it's just at that point, who knows what TV looks like. The transfer market is where you have control over investing in developing talent, playing it and developing it, and then selling it. Or going to South America and buying young talent and then flipping it and making money. That's where you can immediately change your P&L numbers. And that's what clubs, I think, need to look at more and more in MLS. So you got to change that perception in Europe, because that's where most of the money is, of buying MLS talent.
The question is, bottom line, would you rather control your environment, or would you rather put it in the hands of somewhere else where the numbers aren't all that sure, and you're trying to would you rather be proactive or wait on the actions of others, and having transfer fees and bringing in talent and being able to take care of that yourself should be the number one answer?
You can do both, and they do go hand in hand, because if your product is better and you're bringing in more talent, then you're going to be a more attractive TV property. So, I mean, all that's logical. But I just don't see how TV blows up in the next TV deal to change the fortunes of MLS. I think it's going to be a gradual increase. And the more likely way that MLS teams change those P&L numbers, it's from selling players. I really think that you compare the value of an Atlanta United to an Ajax, for example, and this is what a lot of people did. Atlanta United's valuation would put them in the top 20, 25 clubs in the world. Is there revenue in that ballpark? No, it's nowhere close. But the volatility is nowhere close either. It's so much more stable with the MLS teams. So one of the reasons that you have the volatility is you don't know what your transfer dealings are going to be. So if you're a club like Ajax who makes the bulk of their money in selling players, well, you might have a generation that you're not selling as much. So then you've got to change everything else about how you deal with, your business. So can MLS get to a happy medium? Yes, I think they can. I think where they can look to bring in, Miguel Almiron was sold for, what did that end up being, 25? Let's just put it in the ballpark at 25.
Yeah.
So can MLS teams shoot for transfer revenue of $30 million a year? Yeah, I think that's realistic. And that's not getting into transfer fees you're going to pay out, and some teams will pay out more, and some teams will be willing to say, you know what, we're not really as interested in buying low and selling high. We want to put a quality product on the field because that's how we're going to make more money in our market. Cool. Some teams are going to say, all right, we'll develop that talent, sell it on, and we'll try to make more money than that. But an average of $30 million a year in transfer sales outgoing, that'd be a big jump. And it'd be worth it. And it's not a crazy investment to see happen. But you've got to commit to doing things a little differently. If you're some of these clubs, you've got to commit to playing young talent, letting it ride. Managers are going to, take risks in playing that young talent, or you're going to be going into South America and scouting more. So, and bringing in talented players there and then having them here for a couple of years, putting them in the shop window and selling them on. It's going to be interesting to see how MLS grows over the next 10 years because you've got expected TV growth, you've got expected sponsorship growth with the World Cup here in 26. You need to have, not expected, you need to actually do it, increased transfer revenue. That needs to happen to be where I think the league wants to be.
We are officially caught up on Twitter, sir. Anything else before we go?
No, that'll do it. Last night, Real Monarchs won the USL Championship, conceded the first goal, and then bounced back and pretty much dominated Louisville City. Big win for the Monarchs, the second team from Real Salt Lake. Jake Edwards talked about Pro Rel, and gongs went off, and everybody went nuts on Twitter. He's talked about it before. And he's talked about it in terms of USL Championship and USL League One, and USL League One has to grow first for that to make sense. So it wasn't news, but it was treated as news. I think it would make a lot of sense between USL Championship and League One, and I think their first dip into that world is going to be a League Cup, which they've talked about between the two, and I'd be excited about to see the gap between the two from a quality standpoint. I think we know the gap from a business standpoint. It's significant, but it's not crazy. It's millions of dollars a year in operating costs between League One and League Two, or League One and Championship. Be curious to see how this process goes. I don't think it's happening anytime soon. Go watch the penalty that Brazil got against Mexico in the U17 World Cup final. VAR got involved. I think it was horrible. And Brazil at home got a huge benefit. Now, they did score a great second goal to win it in stoppage time, but, man, it felt like nothing to do with clear and obvious and VAR asking the referee to take a look at it. I was shocked at it, so... Mexican fans are not happy about penalties being given to opponents in Brazil again. 2014, you'll remember the No Era Penal and Arjen Robben throwing himself to the ground and the Netherlands knocking Mexico out. They got another one to add to the list, so I can't really blame them. I thought this was a horrible call. Tonight, 6 o'clock, soccer over there, Brewhouse Cafe. Come join us. Come buy a scarf. Go to Teespring. Buy a shirt ahead of time. Do your thing. Support the show. We appreciate it. Thanks, everybody who posted pictures of your swag. That's pretty cool. Tomorrow, we'll be on the air in the morning, as normal, and then tomorrow evening will be over at Wild Heaven in the West End. 7 o'clock, drinks start flowing. 7:30, we'll start talking. It's me, it's Mike Conti, it's Kevin Egan, a broadcasters roundtable, and we'll talk about the expansion draft because it'll happen a few hours before we get started. So we'll get into that. We'll get into what it's like on the road in MLS. We'll get into crazy broadcast stories and so on and so forth. We'll take questions from you guys. So looking forward to seeing you all tomorrow night at Wild Heaven in the West End. But we'll see you first tonight at the Brewhouse. And if you can't join us at the Brewhouse tonight, you can listen 6 o'clock on the SDH app, soccerdownhere.net, and on Spreaker. Until then, mucha plata, y'all.
Mucha plata.